So there are a number of people who have never who's never even heard of the brewery before, right? So, but of those people who raised your hand, have you ever heard of the beer Old Rasputin? Right. So you've heard of NorthCoast. You just don't know the name of the brewery. So NorthCoast is this kind of, it's a weird thing in that the brewery has been extremely successful and has made beer for a very, very long time. In fact, they're in the class of 1988 for breweries, craft breweries opening in the United States. So breweries in that same time period are, Boulevard's not that old, Schlafly's not that old, Deschutes is in that class. I think Sierra Nevada might be a year or two before that. I think they're 86. So, I mean, we're talking about a brewery that has weathered all of the crap that we've seen, the good of the 90s, the bad of the late 90s and early 2000s, the really crazy stuff that's happening now. They've seen all that, weathered that, and also racked up what, in my opinion, is one of the greatest track records in terms of rate beer scores of any brewery on planet Earth. Now, I know, scores are scores, and you kind of have to put them off to the side, but they're useful as kind of a comparison tool to see what the general public thinks about beers. They don't necessarily tell me, and they shouldn't tell you what to drink. But they give you a good idea of what most people think of a beer. And I believe, and I want to check this and make sure, I'm going to flip over my sheet. I don't think we're having a beer that is under 97 on ratebeer.com tonight. So, I was pretty excited to bring it here. My apologies for Bob Swatzel from NorthCoast Brewing. I actually had him scheduled to be here, and then I actually double booked him for working with our team in Springfield this week. So he was not able to time travel and make it from Springfield to here and back for his stuff going on. So he apologizes. So let's talk about NorthCoast. So being around in 1988, they're from, well, I'll tell you what. I've got a few prizes to give away from NorthCoast for tonight. Some nice decorations for your home bar. Tell me where NorthCoast, the brewery, is on the bar. Fort Bragg, California, very nice. Come grab your prize. So NorthCoast, northern part of California. So California, obviously one of the progenitors of craft beer styles, although these guys don't make a lot of the classic West Coast, IPAs and things like that. Flagship beer for the brewery is the one that we mentioned, which is Old Rasputin. So for those of you that said NorthCoast beer is your favorite beer of all time, is it Old Rasputin? Yeah, and pretty much every single one of you shook your head. No? What is it? Brother Thelonious, which we will also have tonight. And as part of beer school, you're going to get a little jazz lesson tonight, too, for those of you interested in jazz. One of my favorite classes in college, history of jazz. So, been around a long time, but not very well known. Extremely high scores, but nobody knows because there's no NorthCoast IPA. There's no NorthCoast Belgian Strong Dark. There's no NorthCoast Russian Imperial Stout. They have individual names for the beers. So that makes it hard to keep up with them. Yes? Excellent. Thank you. So the first beer that has a really weird name and a really, really pretty color to it is a beer called Scrimsaw Pilsner. So Scrimsaw refers to kind of these ancient mariner carving things. These I'm not that familiar with it, to be honest with you, because not an art guy. But these kind of, I'm sorry? Whales too, thank you. Carvings that they name the beer after. This Pilsner is kind of an Americanized version of it. I'll tell you what. First thing you do, take a look at it. Tell me what you see. How's it look? Good? Clear? Yeah? For those of you that got the China translucent cups, it's hard, but it's clear. Give it a sniff. How's it smell? Like beer? Who said like beer? Way to go. I love it. Because it does. I know a lot of you have heard this story before, but I get really pissed off when people start to try to impress you with their vocabulary and how to describe beer. Wine is famous for it in the 90s, and it's just one of those things that it really sets me off when people try to impress you with vocabulary for describing. So yes, it smells like beer. It smells what are the things that make beer smell like beer? Malty, hoppy, bready. This one kind of smells biscuity, toasty a little bit, right? And they use some Pilsner malts in here. So they're using some classic European ingredients. They add a little bit of American touch to it. So taste it. How's it taste? So first things first. Does it taste like it smells? Yes, right? This beer tastes exactly like it smells. It's got that bready, slightly hoppy flavor to it. And then what else do you notice about this beer? Clean, right? Crazy clean. There is no butter. There is no lingering kind of hop-off flavor. There are no tannins. Tannins are the hardest thing to get out of Pilsner beer styles, because when you're mashing in at the brewery and trying to mash in at these temperatures required to extract sugars and get all the alcohol in it that we want. Did I lose anybody there? Everybody understand what I'm talking about? Because if I lost you, just raise your hand and I'll back up. You good? Okay, good. So when you're mashing at those high temperatures, though, as you're getting ready to pump the wort into the brew kettle and start adding hops, you have to raise those temperatures up to about 170 degrees. And as you do that, it's really easy to extract tannins out of the husks of the barley. And those tannins are bitter, just like hops are bitter, but bitter in a very, very different way. They're actually very, very bitter, like skins of grapes, and that tannic bitterness from big red wines. You know the one I'm talking about, where you drink it and it's all over your teeth, and you've got to kind of scrape it off your teeth and that kind of stuff. Or those are tannins from the husks of barley, and that stuff shows up everywhere in pilsners all the time. It's actually one of the things I think that's cool. We can go ahead and start doing the next beer when you guys are ready. One of the things I think it's cool about few things that are cool about mass-produced domestic beers is you don't get any of those tannins in a very, very light beer. They're really, really difficult to hide, and this is one of the great pilsners in that you don't taste any of it. Really, really clean and smooth. So what's the other thing that you notice about this beer? Who said that? You're exactly right, whoever said it. It's not there. Who said that? It just vanishes, right? It is not there. It is, as soon as you drink it, it's just gone, right? And why is that? What makes that happen? Anybody? Not a rhetorical question, a real question. Yes, in the back. Good brewers is a big part of it, but good brewers chose one particular ingredient that is making that aftertaste completely vanish and disappear. You want to try it again? I see your hand up. What kind of yeast? A good yeast, but specifically lager yeast, right? Very nicely done. Lager yeast. Lager yeast, you could take this same beer and ferment it with an ale yeast, and you would get a beer that looks the same, smells mostly similar, it'd have a little bit of fruitiness to it, but it would finish with this bite and this aftertaste, very much like a Kolsch or a blonde ale or something like that. But when you ferment it with lager yeast and ferment at those cooler temperatures over longer periods, that bottom fermentation, you get a beer that, regardless of the flavor that came from the malt and the hops and everything else that's in there, finishes very cleanly, very smoothly, leaves very little aftertaste, and also makes you what? Thirsty, right? God bless lager beer for making you thirsty every time you drink it, right? It's one of the key things, and it's why the big breweries make lager beer. It's why German beer spread all over the world in the in the mid-1800s when Mr. Carlsberg finally isolated lager yeast and made it at the Carlsberg Brewery. They named the yeast after him, actually, originally. The yeast, the Latin taxonomy was Saccharomyces carlsbergensis, after Mr. Carlsberg, who isolated it. And he stored it on the trip from his brewery, from the caves to the brewery, under a stovepipe hat to keep it cool. So, lager beer gives you that clean, smooth finish, regardless of what lager you're drinking. Now, one of the things that really kind of irritates me, though, over time, is that people will say, well, lagers are light and ales are dark. And I don't drink ales because I don't like dark beer. Well, there are plenty of ales that look just like this and taste just like this. Full Circle be a great example of that. Super light, crisp, easy drinking, Kolsch style, actually fermented cool, kind of like an ale, or I'm sorry, kind of like a lager, but made with ale yeast, so you kind of get a blend of both characteristics. So Kolsch's are great alternatives to lager beers for anybody who says, I only drink lager beers, meaning I only like domestic beer, but I want to try something new and try something different. Kolsch is a great style to try because it's an ale that drinks like a lager. So what do you guys think of this beer? Anybody having this for the first time? Scrimsaw? Yeah? A couple people? You guys like it? It's a great beer for your homework at the end of class today, which I'm going to give you. And I know a lot of you know what that is already because I get the same homework all the time. But that is going to be a great one to use on your friends and unsuspecting neighbors who say they don't like craft beer. I don't drink big beer. I don't drink heavy beer. I don't drink any of that craft stuff. It's too heavy and it's too bitter, stuff like that. Because actually, this has some bitterness to it, but the overwhelming quality of this is sweetness. And from a classic German Pilsner comparison, because the Pilsners are all classic German styles, from a classic German comparison, I would put this closer, halfway in between a Pilsner and a Helles, almost, in terms of flavor profile. because that sweetness is right there. But from an alcohol perspective, that's where they've Americanized it, and pumped it up, because the alcohol is at right under 5%, where Helles would be closer to 4%, a little bit lower. Those German beers, once you get a point or two in alcohol up or down, then you change style completely. You go from 5 into the 6s, then you're into Dortmunder and things like that, and it just, then Germans start getting drunk fast, like at Oktoberfest, that kind of stuff. So yes, questions? You know me, I don't memorize IBUs. Around 20 is exactly right. 22 to be exact. Your flavor, you're going to have to take the hat off maybe. Cool down a little bit, recalibrate. Exactly, drink more beer. That's perfect. What other questions you guys have so far? Anything? All right, well then let's move on to the next beer. Thank you. Shoot. Anybody surprised by how much they like this, given that it's super light and super easy to drink? Yeah, a couple people. I don't always drink Pilsners, but when I do. Good enough. Okay. So the next beer you have in your glass is called Puck, I believe, right? Is that the one we're doing right now? Puck, which is a saison. So we'll do the same exercise again. Take a look at it. How's it look? Clear, maybe a slight, tiny bit of chill haze. All right, what's it smell like? Different, right? Dramatically different. Different how? Floral, citrusy, I like that. Anybody else? What else do you smell? You know what I love about saying what you smell? Can't be wrong. It smells cleaner than the other one, so it has even less of an aroma than the other one. What'd you say up here? Chocolate. Probably not. White chocolate, maybe. Do you actually smell chocolate? Yeah, fair enough. If you had actually smelled chocolate, though, and weren't just trying to fuck with me, then that would be accurate. Because what I love about tasting, so I taste beer all across the country. I'm a nationally certified beer judge, part of the BJCP. I go to the Great American Beer Festival and judge competitions. One of the greatest things about going to these competitions is I've been able to sit next to the original brewmaster from Sierra Nevada, or Garrett Oliver, all these guys who write books and that you see on TV and all this kind of stuff, and they'll be the first to tell you, I taste this, but I always taste this. What do you taste? And I know, it's about knowing your palate and knowing kind of what you're susceptible to, what you like, what you don't like, what you're able to taste, what you're not able to taste, flavors that set you off that you just can't get past. For my wife, so we're both beer drinkers in the house, but she's a crazy hophead, and I love malt. Like the sweeter, maltier, caramelly a beer can be, I love it. And she takes one sip of this pancake syrup stuff that I drink, Scotch ales and porters and stuff like that. She's like, just get away from me. I can't stand it. But she is all about double imperial IPAs, West Coast, whatever. And I'm like, oh, great. That tastes like a bowl of hops. That's awesome. But you have to understand what's different. And to your point, if you actually taste something in a beer, it's there. It is your brain telling you that those are the aromas that are in there. And we can do graduate school on the analysis of how your brain analyzes flavor compounds, aroma compounds, and how the synapses fire to your brains, because it's really actually pretty fascinating and really boring if you're not into it, so I won't do it today. But we could do that sometime, and it's you can really kind of get right down to knowing almost before you drink and smell a beer what you're going to like and what you don't like. And that's part of beer school. It's what we want to try to get you to. So, but getting back to Puck. So Puck they call a petite saison, and I agree that it has these floral, citrusy kind of characters. I agree that the aroma is low, that it's not jumping out of the glass like a big, full-bodied, like those big kind of orangey saisons, or beer de gardes, either one. So if you're in Belgium, they call it saison. If you're in France, they call it a beer de garde. Two breweries on either side of the same river can make the same beer, call it different things. They're largely the same thing. These are farmhouse beers. People throw that term around a lot. In farmhouse beers, in a farm, they would make beers of different grades, some for drinking like water, because it was always safer drinking the beer than drinking the water. Some that were made to be stronger and last longer. Those are what the farmhouse beers were, because they had to last through the summertime. they would make some actually from the harvest. And they'd make some to last through the summertime as well. They were always higher gravity so that they would last longer. That higher alcohol content causing them to be preserved. So in this case, though, they've gone the other way and made what they call a petite saison. You guys want to move on to the next beer? Petite saison, kind of a play on petite syrah or whatever you want to call it. This kind of smaller, sessionable, to use the modern terminology, saison. So that's why the aroma's low, the ABV is lower, the yeast flavor profile and aroma is lower on all of it, so that you can actually have 2 or 3 of these suckers and enjoy them. So when you taste it, what do you guys taste? Creamy is good. I like that. Because creamy can come from a number of different areas. If there's yeast left in the beer, that can cause creaminess. That's not the case here. So the creaminess then comes from mashing and how they mash the beer and the malts that they use to make the beer. So malts that will leave sugar compounds left over that are not fermented by the yeast into sugar, but they're not big enough sugars to taste sweet, like some of the kind of malty flavors in here. They're just kind of these 2, 3, 4 carbon long sugars, the maltose and dextrose and things like that, that don't taste sweet and just give what I call mouthfeel or body. And creaminess in this case is from the malts they use and how they mash and the temperatures at which they mash. Mash at a slightly higher temperature, and you're going to favor some of that stuff. So cream ales would be a great example of that, and they're kind of using that in this. I agree 100%. What else do you guys taste? Anything? It's interesting. Lemon, big time lemon, flowers. Sure, it smells like a florist shop. But it has a little bitterness, right? So again, a little bit of Americanization of that saison style in order to bring out some of those hop characteristics. So what do you guys think of that? Do you like that? Yeah, it's good. It is easy to drink. You can have more than a few of them. And I was looking, yeah, ABV is at 4%. So, which, more than a few. Welcome. I'm just trying to help you sell beer, Chad. Come on, man. You can even drink it in a big glass, a pitcher, maybe even a growler. Working for you. Okay. So, Session Saison. Petite Saison. So, it is clever, because I agree, and it also fits my Mitch Turner descriptor maximum, which is any more than 3, I'm out. So, Petite Saison with lemon, coriander, and cream, out. I'm out. 4 descriptors, that's too many. 2 or 3, I'm in. That's just personally for me. You make up your own rules. That's what's fun about drinking beer. All right. So anybody just think that this is one of the coolest things they've had in a long time? Yeah? I like this beer a lot, and it is brand spanking new. It's been around for maybe a couple of months. Here in Missouri, the brewery's been making it for longer. One of those things they kind of experiment around with, and then everybody at the brewery gets infatuated with, and then all of a sudden we get it here in the Midwest. Because in the Midwest, we're always the last to get shit, right? We're always the last to get everything. So this is, we're among the first to get this because it hasn't made it out to the East Coast yet. So you can brag to all your friends that you get puck and they don't. All right, cool. So any questions about that? I see a lot of nodding heads on that one. Excellent. All right, third beer that is coming up right now is Brother Thelonious. And I'm going to start talking about it now, even though not everybody has it. So I'm not going to talk about the beer yet. I'm going to talk about why they make this beer and how they name it. I guess you do all have this beer. All right. So Brother Thelonious. Everybody knows who Thelonious is, right? Thelonious Monk, classic jazz pianist from the mid-40s all the way through the kind of early 70s. NorthCoast, the owner of NorthCoast, is a crazy jazz fanatic and actually doesn't do a lot in St. Louis, does some. They actually support a few jazz foundations in Kansas City where they have a similarly rich jazz history to what we have in St. Louis, although a little closer to the brewery, 4 hours closer to the brewery. And they get involved in sponsoring a ton of music-related charitable events. They also produce this beer, which is Brother Thelonious. So Brother Thelonious is one of my personal favorites long-term. It's been made for a very long time. And it is a Belgian strong dark ale, which I know you're like, oh, well, that's incredibly descriptive. What does that mean? I always like to describe it in terms of other beers that are like it, and the classic is Chimay Blue Label. So that big, you got it? You know the flavor profile that we're talking about, right? Big, rich, around 9%. All the Trappist strong beers, the Roquefort, the Westmalls, all that. They're top of the line, big, fat Trappist beers. That's what this beer style is. So you could argue, and I plan on doing this when I meet the brewery owner for the first time here in a couple of weeks, why the hell did you make such a small niche beer, the beer that you're going to use to donate a whole bunch of money to jazz foundations? Well, I don't know the answer to that. I plan on finding that out, and I'll report back next time I'm here. But what they do is they donate a portion of the proceeds from every sale of this beer, case and draft, to I think it's the American Institute of Jazz or American Jazz Foundation. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's an organization that basically fosters jazz education for youth that maybe couldn't afford that type of education and skills training in jazz. So as a lover of music, I like that. As a lover of kick-ass beer in this style, I like the two things together. So you can support a good cause and drink great beer at the same time. So take a look at it, give it a sniff, give it a smell. Tell me what you guys think. Ooh, strong, like bull, right? What's this smell like in the back? You knew you were going to like it as soon as you smelled it, right? And when you tasted it, did you like it? See, best teacher ever, right? What's it smell like? Maple syrup? Totally. What else? Bourbon, caramel, I heard. Sherry casks, right? What else? Bananas. Thank you for saying the obvious. I appreciate that. What usually goes with banana in beer? Clove, peanut butter. Who said peanut butter? Raise your hand. Who said peanut butter? Beer for the king? Peanut butter and nanner beer? Love it. We need to make one of those. Sounds cool. Will you make some peanut butter and nanner beer, Lou? It needs to have shag carpeting on the outside of the bottles. It is gross. Probably not the best beer school idea I've ever had. All right, so taste it. Does it taste like it smells? Heaven, delicious. I heard those two things. I like that. Heat. Thank you. This is 9%, I believe. Thank you. 9. So you guys know this by now. I'm weak on the stats. 9.4, 32 IBUs. Super sweet, right? It doesn't even taste like 30 IBUs. It tastes like it's about 15, right? The hops in this are completely and utterly overwhelmed by sweetness and yeast character. And the yeast character is that big banana character, the clove, and that yeast, the maltiness, that syrupy, bourbony, pancake syrup stuff. Yes. Nope. Nope. No oak aging to this beer. So potent? So, great question. How is alcohol content generated in these beers, and how do you get this one at 9.5%? It's easy. Malt. Add more malt. So that's also why this beer comes in 4-packs and is like 10 or 11 bucks, you know. It takes a lot of malt to get up to that alcoholic strength. So the more malt you add, the more grain you add, the more sugar you get. The more sugar you get, the yeast eat that and turn it into the fun stuff in beer, the alcohol and the carbon dioxide, the buzz and the bubbles. So you use the same amount of water, add more sugar, you get more alcohol to a point. Now, yeast will get to a point where they just kind of just give up and die. That point generally is around 15 to 18%, but yeast start to lose effectiveness, certainly in that 7, 8, 9, 10% alcohol range. So as you go up, the weak yeast start dying. This is survival of the fittest in this vat of beer, right? And so as they are... I'm going to gross you guys out. So as the yeast are in there growing and replicating, they're fighting and killing each other and making really, really tasty beer, making all these yummy flavors. But there is an attrition rate, and you will get to a certain point over time where yeast just stop. And that hasn't happened in this case. They've actually mashed the beer to leave some of the sweetness in here. But when you get up, into that 15% range, stuff like that, you can get some beers that are almost taste like artificially sweet, like super syrupy, or even into the Eisbach range and things like that, where they're freezing it to remove some of the water and concentrating that sugar. We're ready for the last beer when you guys are. So that's how you get that alcohol content, and that's also where some of that sweetness comes from as well, with yeast just giving up and stopping, turning some of it into alcohol. Does that make sense? Answer your question? All right, cool. Yeah. So the comment was, I could taste the heat, but I can't tell if that's driven by spices or if it's driven by sweetness or, what's driving that. And I'm here to tell you that it's both. It's spice and it's heat. This beer, and when we talk about heat, we're talking about right here, it's the bourbon warmth, right? The shot of cough syrup when you're sick and you feel that kind of warming, slimy, awesome sensation when you got a sore throat, right? That's that alcoholic, syrupy awesomeness that this beer has and that the next beer has even more of. Oh, dear God, is that what somebody said? It's awesome. Super smooth, right? Every single beer we've had tonight, just clean, crazy smooth. Even the last beer that we have, which maxes out pretty much every spec in the beer world, is still, after you drink it, is crazy smooth. So I agree. I think it's a hallmark of this brewery that across the line, they've had the same brewmaster almost since inception, and that says a lot. When you could find breweries that are able to keep that kind of talent, I think that says a lot, personally. So, for those of you out there that have never had Brother Thelonious before, who is now a fan? Yeah, see, always, at every single tasting. And you know what drives it? It's all of you guys that don't think you like malty beers, but you like malty beer. Come over to my side. It's awesome over here. Trust me. What's that? Come to the dark side. We have cookies. That's exactly right. What's that? Yeah, I doubt it. I don't think she'd like this at all. Does this get better with fermentation? With storage? Yes. So this is right on the edge of the line of beer that I would consider for aging and cellaring at home. Those of you that have been in class before know I'm not a big fan of aging beer. When you buy beer, drink it. Or invite a friend over, give it to them, whatever you're going to do. Beer is not for saving generally. Beer is for drinking, or giving as a gift, or making friends, whatever you want to do with it. But beer's not usually meant to be kept around. This begins to approach the level of beer that could be kept around. The only time you would ever want to keep beer around and age it is if you don't quite like it as much as you think you possibly could right now. So is the spice too strong? Or is the heat too much? And do you think that will soften over time? Because what's going to happen over time is you store beer. And I highly recommend, at least my personal recommendation, is that you store beer cold, store it in the dark, and store it in a place locked up where you can't find the key when you're drunk. You guys know what I'm talking about. Because the first thing that happens when you get drunk about 11 o'clock at night, you're like, hey, let's open the beer I've been saving for 15 years. And the next morning, you're like, what the hell did that taste like? I'm sure it was awesome. So lock it away, put it away, store it cold. And I'm talking cold like refrigerator cold. Cellars are great. If they're at cellar temperature, that's great. But beer ages much more quickly than wine does and has a much lower alcohol content. So you notice the changes much more quickly. And I only recommend aging beer if you are not completely satisfied with the way it tastes right now. If those of you who really like this beer right now, you like it right now, why the hell would you wait? It's 2. I'm not going to break the record. Why would you wait, right? Now, if you're... What the puck? Thank you. If you're so inclined, and as I'm wont to do, I like this beer. I'd kind of like to see what happens to it if I aged it a little bit. So you got to go buy a couple of 4-packs of it, or buy a big bottle of it, and drink one, save another for a couple of months, and then what I like to do is go buy another one fresh, open them side by side. You like the one that you aged for a couple of months? Better? If so, I'm keeping that one. All right, you really want to get nutty with aging beer, here's what you do. Buy a case of it. All right? And 2-3 months from now, go buy a fresh one and try it next to the one that's 2 or 3 months old. And then if you like that, 2 or 3 months from then, you go try another one. If you like that better, wait another 2 or 3 months. You don't like it better at that point, invite a bunch of friends over, drink it all. I'm serious. It's the most fun part about collecting this shit is that you get to try it over time and see the difference and geek out and make notes and all that kind of stuff. I have a group that I get together with once a year. We bought cases of beer and wine now 10 years ago. that we're now opening up. And as a group, there are 4 of us getting together and buying these cases of things because stuff's ridiculously expensive, right? You can't afford, nor should you be able to afford any of this stuff on your own. Get a group of people together and make it a point. You know how hectic and crazy it is right now for everybody to get together? There's one day a year I know I'm not going to book anything, and it's the Saturday night of this party in February every year where we all get together and we decide, okay, we're going to open 1 or 2 or 3 bottles of these different things that we've been saving. So do that, and it's great. But once you find that point where it tastes better or it doesn't taste any better anymore, drink it all. Because that's all that's going to happen is it's only going to get flatter and taste less. What you're looking for is a blending together and a softening of flavors. And that's what happens from aging. That is all you're going to get from it. So, and it works less well with hoppy beers and better with big alcoholic, yeast-driven, malty, barrel-aged whatevers. Blanket term, whatevers. All right, last beer, Old Rasputin. What's it look like? Engine oil. Very, very nice. I like it. It's black, right? Just barely can you see through that. Well, actually, no. Can't see through it. So when brewers measure color of their beers, when they send it out, they measure it in what are called SRMs, standard reference method. SRM of 100 is opaque. This is it. This is the definition of opaque. What else? What? Yes. Opaque. You can't see through it. Opaque. Not clear. So that's all right. It's the more beer I drink, it's hard for me to pronounce things. So, what's it smell like? Don't say engine oil, please. Chocolate, toffee, coffee, toffee, coffee, toffee, coffee. Toast? Who said toast? Yeah, toast. Roasty. Burnt. Anybody at campfire? Yeah? What else? Marshmallows? I love it. Snickers? I like it. Anything else? Come on, hit me with something wacky. Springfield tire fire? You laugh. Kind of one of my favorite descriptors for this beer. Go! All right, take a sip. Does it taste like it smells? It's better than tires, that's for sure. So, as a judge, like I said before, you have to go through training and you have to get certified to be a judge. When you get certified, either as a judge or as a certified Cicerone, they give you beers that you have to taste and clearly identify as key representations of the exact style of beer or one that's not quite right. This is a beer that is universally used as the identifier of the classic Russian Imperial Stout. And it's widely regarded in many circles as the best Russian Imperial Stout, present company excluded, in the world. It is a 100-point beer. There are very few of those on the planet. And when you drink it, you see why. Because it has the big, roasty, burnt coffee, toffee, malty, marshmallowy, toasty flavors. And then after you drink it and it goes down, again, smooth, clean, almost disappearing aftertaste. And all you're left with is kind of this aroma almost coming back up of all this burnt yumminess and the heat of it going down, because this is 9% alcohol as well. It actually, I think, drinks a little bit bigger than 9% alcohol. It almost seems like it's 11 or 12 when you drink it. So it's the session beer of Russian Imperial Stouts. Thank you for laughing. I'll be here all night. So what do you guys think of this beer? Who's never had this beer before and likes it? Okay, who's never had this beer before and absolutely cannot stand it? Do you like stouts at all? Yeah? And just, no stouts. Yeah, you like stouts, but not this one. Why not? Too heavy. I agree 100%. If you're not into this just massive, crushing stout flavor bomb, you've got to kind of prepare yourself for a beer like this, without a doubt. All right. Well, yes. Thank you. So to be clear, the beer that you've just had is standard carbonated beer. On tap, it is, right? Everybody got bottles tonight, right? Good, because that's what it tastes like. Almost stepped in it right there. Undrafted, it's served nitrogenated. And nitrogenization for beer is a way to really kind of mimic old school English pub service on a beer engine, cask beer service. So in England, 16, 17, 1800s, the way beer was served is beer would be sent from the brewery to the pub. Brewery owned all the pubs. Every breweries, they were brewery only pubs. So you go into a Young's pub, guess what? You only got Young's beer. And there was a cellar master in the basement, and that cellar master was responsible for finishing every batch, every cask of beer that was there. And the casks weren't done fermenting. They'd send it from the brewery, half fermented or 3/4 fermented, and they'd send it to the pub to finish and rest there so all the sediment would settle down to the bottom of the cask, and they'd serve it right there where it rested in the pubs. And the way they served it was what we as Americans would call flat and warm, which is not actually the case, but that's how we describe it. They served it warm at cellar temperature at about 50, 55 degrees, which is pretty warm compared to the stuff that we've had tonight. And they served it relatively flat. So normal beer, most of the beer you've had tonight is carbonated to a level of somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 volumes of CO2. They measure the volume of gas compared to the volume of the liquid. So just to put it into perspective, Coca-Cola's like 3, 3.5. Champagne's like 4 or 5. So you can kind of go up the scale. Cask beer is about 1.5, 1.8, something like that. So still carbonated, still plenty of carbonation in there, but half is flat, half is carbonated as normal carbonated beer. And what would happen is when they poured the beer, they would pull it up with a hand pump, a beer engine, pump it all the way up to the first floor, and they would send it into a glass. And you've seen the kind of goosenecks from the hand pumps, right? Everybody seen those? Maybe you haven't. But they have what's called a sparkler on the end of it, and the sparkler shoots the beer out like a squirt gun almost, and it shoots it into the glass. And what happens is it releases all of carbon dioxide, the little bit of carbon dioxide that was in there, releases it to get that rolling cascade of bubbles and that super, super tight, thick, creamy head. That's one way to get creaminess, is to have this re-fermented in the cask, served on a cask beer engine styles. It generates a ton of creaminess. And so all that process that I just described takes weeks and highly specialized people and entire basements to serve casks from, which nobody pucking has anymore. So a way to mimic that is to nitrogenate beer. So what breweries will do, Guinness is famous for it, this beer is served on cask that way, is it's carbonated to a low volume at about 1.5 or 2, and then it has nitrogen that's added to the beer, which is incredibly hard to do. And that nitrogen then, when it's served on tap out of the specialty tap, which has its own little disc with tiny little holes in it, and as the beer is forced through that, all the carbon dioxide, not all of it, some of it comes out. What does not come out is the nitrogen, because the nitrogen was really hard to get into the beer, and because it was so hard to get into the beer, loosely translated, it comes out really slowly. So it comes out over the course of drinking your glass, and as that nitrogen is coming out slowly as you're drinking it down, it's bringing the rest of the CO2 out with it. It's what creates those nice rings on your glass all the way down, and that super thick head that stays on the beer all the way down. For anybody that's into chemistry, it's all about partial pressures of gas in the atmosphere and stuff like that, which again, we can get into graduate school if you want to, but the bottom, I know, right? So the bottom line, though, is nitrogenization makes your beer taste like old school cask English beer in a much more modern, controllable way. That's what happens. I should have said that up front, I suppose. But it's beer school, damn it, right? So, everybody, yeah, sorry. Get you nodding off in the back row. That's because it's 9% alcohol, right?